Hello again, fellow audiophiles. I am Wave Theory and back today to discuss this. This is the JM Audio OCD Extreme Stealth Edition of HiFiMan's HE-R10d closed back dynamic driver headphone. This can be had in its full configuration right here, as you see, for $999 US. There are some other pricing options that come along with it, which I will discuss here on the other side of shameless self-promotion. But you can order this for just under $1,000 from JM Audio. John Masseria at JM Audio sent this to me for review. Actually, I sent him my HE-R10d that HiFiMan had sent me for review. He did the mod and sent it back to me. Let's see, he really has made no attempt to influence my opinion. He has informed me about pricing options and some of the technical stuff that he does to achieve his mods, as he did with his previous video I did of reviewing his review of the HE-R9, and I'll put a link down to that below. So all of the opinions you're about to hear about this are mine and mine alone. So let's do that shameless self-promotion, and then we'll come back on the other side and talk about the pricing options and the rest of the review. Hey, thanks for watching this video. Please remember to hit that like button, and if you haven't, please subscribe. Also, I have a Patreon set up so that you can help support me on a monthly basis, and I've set up a PayPal donation so that you can help me out in that way too if a monthly subscription does not make sense for you. Links for all of that, including the benefits, in the description below. Please check those out. All right, on with the show. So I reviewed the JM OCD Extreme Stealth Edition mod to the HiFiMan HE-R9 headphones back a few weeks ago. And John Masseria, the JM of JM Audio, I thought did a really good job with that mod. Like, he really evened out the frequency response, improved the spatial performance and the detail retrieval, and any number of things with that HE-R9 mod of his. And then he also increased comfort with the using of different headbands and those types of things. He rewired them so that you lost compatibility with the HiFiMan Blue Mini Bluetooth dongle, but you gained compatibility with basically any standard dual 3.5mm headphone cable out there. So overall, I thought it was a really outstanding job. So when he offered to do the HE-R10d mod for me, basically do the same thing to HiFiMan's higher up offering of the same type, I was very intrigued and thought that sounded great, or sounded like it could be great. So I said, sure. I sent these to him, and he did the mod and sent them back to me. The turnaround time on that was right about a week, about a business week, I think. So it was relatively quick. All right, so the pricing options for that. So let's just get into that real quick. The HE-R10d is usually about a $1,300 headphone. Here in the holiday season, I filmed this in December of 2022, HiFiMan has marked the price down to, I believe, $799 US. Now, HiFiMan has been slashing prices this year during the calendar year of 2022 and leaving prices lower. This one had been reduced from $1,300 to $799 and then went back up. Now it's back down. I don't know if that's going to stay or not. However, even if it doesn't, John will buy one of these for you, essentially, because he has contacts at HiFiMan, and do the modification and ship it to you after the mod is done for a grand total of $999. Right? So that's something to keep in mind. If, however, you already have an R10d that you wish to send to him, it is $175 US to do the mod here, all of the magic that he does in the cups. It's $85 for the Aria style headband that you see here. Now, I think that he will also do the specialized headband that he had ordered and specially made for his mods that looks like the Ananda and Sundara style headband. I'm not sure what the price on that would be. It was very close to what the Aria headband price was for the HE-R9, so I imagine that would be pretty close if you ask him to do that. He also offers the option of painting the cup here from this orange, and I mean, I only know that he offers black. So anyway, if you have an orange can and you want to paint it black, that will be $175 US as well. If you combine all of those options, the mod, the headband, and the paint job, all in for that is $350 USD, according to John. And I will link to his website below where you can ask questions and all of that. And John, if you're out there, I know you're hearing this. If you want to clear up the headband question on that, please leave a comment and I will pin it down below this video. Okay, other than that, just really quick, like what are the mods that he does to this thing other than the obvious headband change here? And that is, I believe it's pretty much the same thing he did with the HE-R9. So I will link to that video and you can watch that one for more in-depth explanation. But just quickly, a recap here is inside the stock cup here, there is apparently very little damping. So these HiFiMan HE-R closed back series have this funky looking cup shape here that is borrowed from the old Sony R10s that were the first headphones to ever use biocellulose drivers in them back in the late 80s, I believe. And of course the patents on all of that lapsed, and so HiFiMan has borrowed that cup design in here, which gives it this odd shape to help make sure that there are like reflections and all of that that are not setting up standing waves and all of that kind of thing inside the cup. But there's not a whole lot of damping in here. What John does is he has a fiberglass-like material, I believe, that he uses in several layers. So it's very light, but it adds mass in here. And then those fiberglass layers have like a grid pattern to them. And he puts several layers in here and turns each one of them just a little bit, and I think what he refers to as a Fibonacci-like sequence. I'm not sure exactly what that means. He's not going to give away trade secrets on that one yet, right? So he turns them a little bit just to, like, again, damp the vibrations and the reflections and all of that kind of stuff that go on in the cup. It also adds mass so that some of the energy in there is deadened too. And I don't have the unmodded original anymore because I had to send this one in to have it modded. Okay, but like you can just kind of hear from the knuckle wrap test that there's not a whole lot of ringing or resonance in there. Like that sounds fairly dead. Okay, so that's good there. Now, it also manages to do all of that and all of that mass loading without adding a ton of weight. These are not particularly heavy. I haven't actually weighed them yet, but they are fairly comfortable, even though they look ridiculous on the head because they just look ridiculous because of these cups, right? They are fairly comfortable. I asked John to do the Aria style headband because on the R9 mod, I thought that one was the more comfortable for me. And so I asked him to do that, and he did. So comfort-wise, it's an improvement over the original too. Like it also stays on the head a little bit better and doesn't slide around much. So that's an improvement there. Mostly, I think, because of the headband and just slightly more clamp force than that stock single headband that had the wire go through it. Now, why did that stock headband have the wire go through it? And again, that's because in stock configuration, the R10d is compatible with HiFiMan's Blue Mini Bluetooth dongle, their little R2R dongle DAC amp that can plug into here. John rewires these so that these will accept basically any standard dual 3.5 millimeter headphone cable, but that does mean you lose compatibility with the Blue Mini dongle. So by the way, John, what do you do with those? Because the Blue Mini dongle comes in the package with the stock R10d. So if you buy those straight from HiFiMan and then do the mod, what happens to those dongles? That's just a question that literally just occurred to me right now. Anyway, that's really neither here nor there. Okay, so those are basically the changes. And again, you can get the color here if you don't like this orange. He will paint that black for you for a little bit extra fee. I obviously didn't do that. So with that out of the way, let's just talk about like one build quirk that I noticed here is that at times the cup, the big thick cups here, like you can see they only go so far on this headband before they catch on the wood right there. So be a little bit careful with how you use them. Like, I'm not seeing scuff marks or scratches, and they're not going to show up on the camera either as a result of that, but that is a thing that happens where eventually it catches and drags on that wood there just a little bit. So do keep that in mind, but it doesn't appear to be that big of a problem. Okay, but yeah, that's probably about it as far as the ergonomics and features and build and all of that go. So let's talk about the sound. Before we jump into the sound here, let me tell you what my test gear was real quick. And let's see, so there's been a number of things that I've plugged the R10d mod into here. So for amps, it got plugged into basically each one of the $599 amps that I had in here for a recent comparison. Links below, but those would include the Topping A90D, the Singer SA1, both modded and unmodded, and let's see, the Shitliar Plus and the Lake People G111 Mark II. This thing was also plugged directly into my Canon N6 Mark II DAP for a little bit. It was used on my Cord Hugo 2 and my Vioelectric HPA V281 desktop amp. For DACs, I used the Shit Bifrost 2/64. I used the Musician Draco, which just came in for review, and the Cord Hugo 2 in there as well, and a little bit my Berkeley Alpha Series 2 DAC. So combinations of all of those. And I gotta say, John has again made a marked improvement from the stock R10d to this Extreme Stealth Edition modification. So the stock version had really heavy, hard-hitting bass, very forward bass presence and all of that. It was also a little bit mid-forward. The mid-range could be a bit shouty and honky and all of that. The treble was not particularly pronounced or forward in its presentation, but there was a bit of a treble peak in it that had some sibilance. Most of those problems, okay, particularly through the mids and in that treble peak, have been mostly smoothed over with the mod here. The mid-range is still a little bit forward and still a bit more present than I normally personally like, but it avoided being overly honky or shouty or anything like that. In fact, I didn't really notice a whole lot of shout or honk in the sound much at all. It did happen occasionally, but wasn't a huge problem. I also noticed that even on some pretty sharp and sibilant tracks, the sibilance was pretty much gone. Like, if there was sharp S's and stuff like that, it's usually because that's in the recording. This really was not adding to it at all there. Though I think John made a good decision in keeping the bass here basically as it was in terms of presence and physicality, because the stock configuration had really fun bass to it, and he's mostly maintained that. There is really, again, powerful, hard-hitting, really slammy and punchy low end here with lots of presence, decent extension, and some good sub-bass rumble to go with it. Okay, so that was a good decision. So you overall get a bass in mid-forward headphone that manages not to be shouty and then has enough treble to not sound dark or dull, but also, basically never get fatiguing and all that, and be fairly smooth through the treble from a frequency response standpoint. Now, I think that the spatial presentation here also really improved. Like, these have a pretty big sound stage to them. They sound quite expansive. Now, they're not quite as big as like HiFiMan's egg-shaped cup open backs, and they put you more in the performance rather than what those egg-shaped open backs do, where they present you their performance out in front. These put you a little bit more in it. Not quite to the extent that like a Focal or an Odyssey will do, but it's more like the Focal or Odyssey spatial presentation than it is the HiFiMan open back presentation. Okay, but it also, again, it's big. It sounds pretty expansive in its sound staging here, and it has surprisingly good depth too, this way, for the price point in that staging. The imaging and separation, so localizing sounds within that sound stage, which is the imaging, and then putting space between those sounds, which is the separation, is Not necessarily reference class, but it is a marked improvement over the stock version as well. Okay, so it's not like completely 3D or holographic, but it is a big step forward from what it was. Okay, now the resolution, also an improvement over the stock version. Like there's some okay bass texturing, and you can hear the finger action on bass guitars and some of the upper harmonics of bass guitars and all of that pretty well. And so forth, but it does get a little bit mushy sounding when passages get really busy, like big classical works and that sort of thing, where you've got lots of instruments all going at once. It can lose its integrity just a little bit. So the resolution is an improvement over stock. It is okay in general. It's not outstanding. I want to comment also on a thing that I noticed with the R10D mode, R10D mod, excuse me, and that is that it has a fair amount of signal chain sensitivity. It is a little bit amp picky. So it, more so than some other headphones that I have here on hand, brought out some differences between like those $600 amps that I mentioned. Like for example, when I first got it back from John and I first plugged it in, I plugged it into the SA1, and that was with the jumper mod in place on that. And it sounded reasonably good and so forth, but I wasn't completely wowed by it yet. It didn't take quite the jump that I had expected it to, given the JM R9 mod that I had done, or done a review of previously. But then I unplugged it from the SA1 and plugged it into the Lyre 3 Plus, or Lyre Plus, excuse me, and I was like, whoa, okay, there it is. Just a lot more spatial coherence, holographic spatial presentation, a little bit more detail and that sort of thing. And that kind of stayed true there, is that it had some fairly big swings in terms of particularly amps. Actually, I don't want to say that, but it had some pretty big swings with signal chain. The signal chain that I just did not like on it was the Musician Draco DAC via balanced into the HPA V281 amp. Now what's interesting is that the R10D sounded fine on the HPA V281 with basically any other DAC. And it also sounded pretty good with the Draco on any other amp that I tried. Okay, any other amp that I tried. So, but those two together didn't work very well. Now I haven't had much time with the Draco. My sense is that it's a little bit more like smoother and kind of a relaxed sound so far. Initial impression, okay? Please do not quote me on that. I'm working on a full review for it. But I'm thinking that the R10D mod here responds best when at least one of the amp or DAC in the signal chain is a bit more incisive and detail forward kind of thing, like the Chord Hugo 2 is, like the Berkeley DAC that I have is, like the Bifrost 2/64 can be at times. It's more so than the original Bifrost 2 anyway. I think that added incisiveness really helps the R10D a little bit, and it draws that out, whereas you have a warm, smooth DAC and a warm, smooth amp, and then you plug the R10D into it, like I'm pretty sure is going to end up being the case with the Draco V281 R10D combination, then it just like doubles down and is like becomes too much of a good thing. So I think you do need some incisiveness and detail forward in your signal chain somewhere to get the best out of the R10D. Okay, so overall, I think this was a well done mod, looking at it just itself here. So we're going to get into comparisons here in a moment to help further understand and unpack the strengths of this thing, but it is definitely a marked improvement over the stock in just about every way that matters, I think. And I think that is important for, potential buyers out there to know, but also for HiFiMan, because I thought that the stock R10D at $1,300 was just not worth that money. It is a much better deal at $800. But what I think John has mostly done, and we'll get to the comparisons here in just a moment and why I say this, but he has basically taken a headphone that should cost about $800, where the sale price is, and modified it for, you know, just shy of $200 more than that, and made it sonically competitive with some of the $1,300 closed backs that are out there. I have one of those. That's Focal Radiance, which I have had for a while now, and I love it. This is still one of my favorite all-around headphones, I say, that I use fairly frequently. Okay, and so that's one point of comparison, and the other one that I'll talk about here briefly is the Audeze LCD-XC, the 2021 edition. So that's the closed-back version of the LCD-X, which I believe is also $1,300, maybe $1,400. I'd have to look that up, but it's in that range. Okay, so unfortunately, it's been a while since I've heard the LCD-XC, and so I'm going to have to go on memory here. So let me just comment quickly on that comparison with the R10d mod. So the LCD-XC, for one thing, is going to stand out in terms of it's a planar magnetic headphone, where these two are both dynamic driver headphones. And so planars, because they typically, not always, but they typically have more driver area than dynamic drivers do. They make everything sound a little bit bigger, and you're getting hit by a larger wave front when you hear sound. So like if you like that kind of planar magnetic sound where everything just sounds a little bit bigger and, you know, that sort of thing, then the LCD-X might be the way to go. I think the LCD-X has a higher ceiling than the R10d mod, and arguably even the Radiance, in terms of its raw resolution and detail retrieval. Like, it can do texturing a little bit better. It can do room reverbs and ghost notes and all of that subtle stuff a little bit better than either the R10d or the Radiance can, from memory anyway. And it also, it has like a little bit cleaner bass extension, a little bit more linear bass anyway, like all the way down, whereas these two kind of bring in more of a bass shelf. Now, I think the stock tuning of the LCD-X is a bit of a mess, but just my opinion there. Audeze went for a mid-forward, more studio-oriented tuning on that, but overdid it to where it is too aggressively mid-forward. Sounds very lean, very hollow in its stock tuning, but it does respond to EQ very well. So if you're willing to spend the money for a hardware EQ or Audeze's Reveal EQ system, the LCD-X 2021 closeback can just sound amazing, right? That can be a really, really good and enjoyable headphone, but it's big, it's bulky, and even though it's easy to drive, it is not mobile friendly or anything like that. And it isolates reasonably well, but it's not friendly. It's big, bulky. It's, you know, it's got some ergonomic quirks to it that you need to keep in mind. Now, as far as the Radiance goes here, in comparison with the R10d, there's a similar like bass shelf and hard-hitting physicality in the low end and rumble in the sub bass with the Radiance and the R10d. I found these two to be very closely related, or very similar to each other in terms of that bass presence, punch, slam, extension, and rumble. They're very close. And since I really love that trait about the Radiance, I really enjoyed that trait on the R10d mod as well. From there, things diverge just a little bit. The Radiance does not have as much mid-range presence as the R10d mod does, and it is a little bit smoother yet than the mod, the R10d mod, in its tonal balance through the mid-range and in through the treble. So it has a little bit more natural tonality and timbre to it because of that. So it sounds a little bit more lush and a little bit more natural and a little bit more believable with voices and acoustic instruments and things of that nature. I think it is also slightly more resolving, generally speaking. I noticed a little bit more bass texture, a little bit more like zizziness, that zizzy sound that you hear when a bow is dragged across a string of like a violin or something like that. I noticed that a little bit more clearly with the Radiance. And also the Radiance holds its cool, like it keeps its cool, it stays coherent when passages get really busy a little bit better than the R10d mod does. Now, their presentations are also a little bit different. They have very similar aggressive bass presentation, as I just mentioned, but through the mids and the treble, the Radiance is a little bit sweeter and more laid back. The R10d mod, particularly through the mids, is a bit more aggressive and forward and energetic and lively in its presentation. So even though I think the Radiance is, say, technically superior because of the resolution and timbre advantages, which aren't huge but are noticeable, like, I think I prefer it more often, particularly with the kind of music that I like to listen to. Like, so for vocal-oriented and classical music where there's like a lot of acoustic instruments, or if you're into jazz or that sort of thing, I think this is the way to go. But also for hard rock and metal, the more laid-back presentation through the mid-range and in through the upper mids and all of that on the Radiance makes it less fatiguing and a bit more forgiving for that kind of music, which is one of my favorite genres in there than the R10d here. However, this mod of the R10d can sound utterly fantastic and engaging and fun with things like hip-hop and electronic music, be that EDM, dubstep, techno, you know, things of that nature. Like even some top 40 kind of pop music that is out there, this can sound really good. So stuff that is a little bit slower in the beats per minute and doesn't necessarily need as much raw detail retrieval and all of that, but has a lot of heavy, hard-hitting bass to it, these can really shine. So if you are a fan of hip-hop, of EDM, dubstep, electronic music, and all of that, and you're looking for a closed back, this is a really solid option and an excellent performer there at about $1,000 US. Now, last thing I want to talk about here then is just like actually using it and all of that, because these are closed backs. And even though this is a closed back, it does not isolate particularly well. It doesn't do all that great of a job holding music in or keeping ambient sounds out. It's not horrendous, but it's not great at that. Okay, so if you're going to buy one of these and use it at an office cubicle or something of that nature, you might need to keep in mind the sound leak. And also, because of this headband styling and just the size of the cups and all of that, it's also not the most travel or mobile friendly. I think from a mobile and travel use case, and also if you're in a noisy environment and you need to keep sound leak low, the Radiance does a better job of that. And then again, also because it has the single bar headband here and just a lower profile on the cups and all of that, it's a little bit more travel and on-the-go use friendly. Now, exactly how much better is the Radiance than the R10d mod at sound leak? I actually did a video clip where I recorded some examples of that. And I will play that here for you at the end of this video after I'm done, if you want to stick around and hear that. I just played some music while wearing the headphones and let this microphone pick it up. And so, like, in both cases, you know, you can hear me breathe a few times because it's right in the path of my nose wind here. The mic is anyway. Like, you can hear me breathe a little bit, but I think the difference in sound leak came through pretty clearly in that test. So I will go ahead and put that up here at the end of the video for you so that you can hear that. But making some conclusions here then on the R10d mod. Okay, if you can get past just the goofy aesthetic of it, okay, John here really improved the performance of the R10d. He really did. What he did is he took a headphone that was inappropriately priced at $1,300 in my opinion, but made it competitive sonically, particularly for slower BPM music genres that are bass heavy, like hip hop, some EDM, dubstep, okay, techno, like those kinds of things, and some like contemporary pop 40 kinds of music. Okay, and he made them sonically competitive, particularly for those genres, with other around $1,300 closebacks like the Focal Radiance, like the Odyssey LCD-XC. That's quite an accomplishment. And then the fact that all of that is available for $999 US makes it quite a deal, in my opinion, if those kinds of music are things that you are interested in. Okay, so that's not nothing, and I think HiFiMan probably needs to send John a big thank you message, because I think it does give the R10d a bit of a second wind. Okay, it is, I mean, as much as I love HiFiMan as a company and most of their other products, a couple of their closebacks here have been a little less than stellar, and clearly their closebacks are a work in progress. They will get better, I'm confident of that, but in the meantime, okay, having a mod like this for a pretty reasonable price can really help HiFiMan sell some of these headphones. Okay, and that's not nothing. So thanks to John Masseria at JM Audio for doing this mod and sending it to me. Thank all of you for watching. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, please do so. Please leave a like. Please leave a comment. Right, please check out my PayPal, where you can do a one-time donation to support this channel and help me keep it running. And you can also join my Patreon for a monthly subscription, where you get to talk to me and some of my friends on Discord, and some other benefits such as early access to my videos and all of that. All right, I am Wave Theory. This has been my review of the JM Audio HiFiMan R10 OCD Extreme Stealth Edition mod. That's kind of a long name. But thanks for watching, and as always, enjoy the music. All right, let's see how well this works. Going to start with the R10d mod on the head here. Got the headphone cable, which is a Gravedigger Corpse cable, wrapped around my neck here, and that's just to keep the wires from banging into the microphone, because we're just going to use the lav mic here. That is commonly strapped to my chest for these videos. And the little clip of music that we are going to play here is going to be the standard that I go to when I need music for this channel. And that is going to be the album Polygon Dwanland, the title track I will use, from King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard. And I use that one because they released that one completely in the public domain ever since it was launched. So I know that I'm not going to get blocked or anything like that if I use that album. All right, adjust this to my reference level. Here we go. All right, don't know if you heard that drum fill in there because it's a leak test, right? But that's a good place to stop it. So let me switch these out real quick, and I will say that the amp and DAC that I'm using to do this test here real quick, I switch these out. We've got the Bifrost 2/64 over here and the Lake People G111 Mark II. Why did I use those? Just because they were in a pile on my floor over there because I have so much other stuff on my desk right now. Figured I'd get them out and use them for this. Sourcing it from my Canon N6 Mark II DAP, which is plugged in via coax to, or the USB-C to coax adapter cable from Canon as well. All right, Now I don't think I have to adjust the volume on these because the Radiance and the R10d mod they actually drive very similarly. But here, let me start this. Oops, I'm sorry. All right, yeah, that was pretty close in volume right there. And I haven't measured it, but by ear, that was very close. Okay, so hopefully that leak test was helpful. And yeah, we'll leave it there. I mean, feel free to bounce back and forth between the two using the mouse or your finger to navigate the YouTube video and hear those back to back. All right, hopefully that was helpful.